It initially began with the color green. The deep, rich green seen on dollar bills and the healthiest corn stalks became less common in the soybean fields of the Kother family. Chalking up their observations to a recent change in seed variety, they spent their summers shucking peas and having evening cookouts with their families, not knowing the trouble in store. The next year, their attention went from green to yellow. The once hardy crops tended on their fields for decades became a chlorotic shade of gold, indicating a severe hunger for nutrients. As he did every spring, Mr. Kother sprayed his usual amount of anhydrous ammonia before planting, but his yields that year were worse than ever. Finally, their attention went from yellow to brown. Deep in a constantly disturbed and amended soil lay a serious and now common problem. The traditional methods of farming left the Kothers with declining returns in their once verdant fields. Their practices were no longer sustainable. The word sustainable has been thrown around for generations, and its definition changes depending on the person or organization one speaks to. Historically, it has meant a system that maintains its own viability by using techniques that allow for continual reuse. That definition was put into the context of agriculture by SARE, the Organization for Sustainable Agriculture Research and Education, in 1988. They define sustainable agriculture as having three goals or pillars: profit over the long term, stewardship of our natural resources, and quality of life for farmers, ranchers, and their communities. The need for sustainable agriculture has become more crucial as our population continues to grow. In the United States, our food production will have to double by the year 2025 in order to support our world's rapidly growing population. However, if our traditional methods are reaching the point of diminishing returns, how are we going to do that? In order to solve our pending agricultural dilemma, we must first look at the leading factors causing the need for sustainable agriculture. First and foremost, significant research indicates traditional farming techniques degrade the quality of soil, agriculture's most important natural resource. From the 1940s to the 1990s, over 90% of the degradation of productive land was due to overgrazing, deforestation, and inappropriate agricultural practices. Soil may deteriorate either by physical movement of soil particles from a given site or by depletion of the water-soluble elements in the soil. This erosion decreases the soil's ability to nourish crops, plants, grasses, trees, and other economically useful vegetation. Additionally, the quantity of chemicals applied to soil decreases microbial life, which often has a large benefit to crops. Soil microbes, such as bacteria and fungi, form relationships with plant roots that provide important nutrients, like nitrogen or phosphorus. Fungi can colonize upper parts of plants and provide many benefits, including drought tolerance, heat tolerance, resistance to insects, and resistance to plant diseases. Using pesticides and other synthetic fertilizers often wipes out these microbes. And not only are our current practices depleting our precious soil, but they have harsh effects on our atmosphere as well. With our current agricultural methods, much of the soil's stored carbon has already been released into the atmosphere, or it will be within the next few decades. This not only is a hazard to people, but also causes lower crop yields because crops need carbon to produce sugars and tissue. Additionally, an increasingly carbon-dense atmosphere is expected to change global weather patterns enough to drastically alter local climates and affect plant survivability. To say this is going to challenge humanity is an understatement. On the other end of the spectrum, using sustainable practices does wonders for our soil. In sustainable systems, the soil is viewed as a fragile and living medium that must be protected and nurtured to ensure long-term productivity and stability. Sustainable methods are used to protect and enhance the productivity of the crops. In order to do this, using cover crops, compost and/or manures, reducing tillage, avoiding traffic on wet soils, and maintaining soil cover with plants and/or mulches is necessary. By investing our efforts into sustainable practices, we ensure that the land we're using will be productive for years to come. The second issue needing consideration is the long-term economic challenges that farmers are facing. Current agricultural techniques have many input costs, requiring more money to be spent on labor, equipment, and chemicals such as pesticides, herbicides, and fertilizers. Simple economics dictates that unless prices improve or yields grow, profits will decline when input costs rise. If our nation is to produce higher yields and make higher profits off of these yields, sustainable techniques must be implemented. However, if we look at the long-term profits of sustainable agriculture, we witness the exact opposite. Instead of emptying our pockets, farmers reduce cost by a tenfold. For example, instead of spending money on nitrogen fertilizers, their reliance is on legumes. One sustainable farm in California has taken this concept seriously, planting a clover mix in between the trees in their nut and fruit orchards. Not only do these vegetative cover crops protect from erosion, they pull nitrogen from the atmosphere and deliver it to the roots of the trees, reducing the farm's need to spray additional chemical fertilizers and reducing their overall input cost. So if sustainable practices are good for our natural resources and good for the farm economy, what can we do to ensure that we adequately promote them across the nation? It all begins with education. We can start by supporting school-wide agriculture literacy initiatives, promoting alternative food production practices, and community-supported agriculture programs. The next step is to bring people closer to their food with urban farming ventures, community gardens, and crop shares. Too many people are ignorant of where their food comes from and need to be reconnected to that land. Let's go back to the family that we talked about earlier. All signs pointed towards disaster. The natural resources they so carefully farmed were at odds with their practices, and their increasing inputs left them in a tight economic position. However, the Kother family of Iowa is hardworking, passionate stewards of the land, and they chose to make a change and fix their deteriorated land. They now use the sustainable methods of cover cropping, intercropping, and rotational cropping to improve their land, and they're seeing results. Scenes like this are happening across the nation when farmers and consumers become aware of the benefits of sustainable practices and the risks of ignoring the warning signs. Farmers are some of the noblest people in the world, and consumers, once educated, can make the decision to support what is right. The research and information is out there. Now it's up to you to find it. Thank you.